So this is a show I did in the Art Gallery in the RHA in 2015 called Into the Woods. And this is, I suppose, a template for how I've started to work recently. It's a large gallery-sized installation of a drawing done on a drawing tablet and Photoshop, and that's pasted up on the walls, and then pinned on top are charcoal drawings. It's a forest, and the structure you see over on the right-hand side is kind of the Unabomber's hut in Montana. And I'm fascinated by the Unabomber, or as my mother kept on calling him, the Eurobomber. But, and for those of you who don't know, he was a maths professor who gave it all up and went to the wilds of Montana, where he lived for many years as a hunter-gatherer. And he was so appalled by the way in which our society was moving that he started to plant bombs, all handmade, which became more and more elaborate. And over time, he killed several people in a protest, in a green protest. He was obsessed about technology and how it's taken mankind down the wrong route, and how, you know, we're going to hell in a handcart. And I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in violence, but I have an awful lot of sympathy with some of his views. So that kind of forms this kind of arid liminal space of the forest. The forest has been a motif in my work, and it's one of the oldest motifs in Western culture, or sorry, in our culture. It goes back to the tale of Gilgamesh, which is set in a forest. So it's kind of a liminal magical space, a doorway between worlds. Next slide, please. Here are some of the drawings from that show. They're quite large. The one in the middle is about it's about 72. It's 5 foot by 6 foot. So they're all big drawings, and they're kind of culled from a variety of sources. The image of the moon is called Bad Moon. It's kind of like a heavy metal album cover. You know, the written word is a lie is a line from A Rotten by Pill. I love the idea of the frame and how it operates and how the gallery operates. I mean, Degas famously said that the frame is the pimp of the painting, which a line I love. And also, there's a famous guy called Paul Guillem, who was painted by Modigliani. He's a famous art hustler in the turn of the 19th and 20th century. And he famously used to get avant-garde art and then put them into gold gilt frames in order to sell them to his bourgeois clients, so the art would fit in with their furniture. And I kind of love how the frame works, you know. And so I would do a drawing, and then I put, sorry, just show the next slide. Next slide, please, Stephen. And I put the frame on it, and I completely changed the image. This is called The Death of Disco. And when I was doing this drawing, or at the time, a lot of Irish artists were doing art about modern architecture. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, that modern architecture had very little impact on my life or on theirs. There was very little modern architecture in Ireland. But what had a massive influence on my life was disco music. And I'm a massive disco fan. And in the late 70s and mid 70s, it was everything that Ireland wasn't. It was joyous, it was sensual, it was sexy, it was free, and it gave me ginormous pleasure, and it still does. And I, you know, at the time we all pretended that we hated disco, but in fact we didn't. And in 1979, in Kumsky Park, in a baseball ground in Chicago, some DJ had organized this thing called Disco Sucks. And they got a ginormous big pile of disco records, which they blew up in the middle of a baseball ground in front of 30,000 people at the end of a baseball game. And there was a ginormous big riot in which the police were involved. And so this is this massive explosion of disco records. And originally to the left-hand side of the cloud, there was what the photograph is based on. It says, "Disco sucks." And you know, disco went into decline after this. But also, like Frank Auerbach, so I imagine I drew this 40 or 50 times. So I use a very heavy duty paper, very rough 300-gram charcoal paper. I use willow charcoal. I would copy the image, square it up from the photograph, put it onto the drawing, and then rub the whole thing down, and then do it again, and then rub it down. And I might do that 30 or 40 times until something starts to happen. And an image will kind of, for want of a better word, to coalesce, you know. And so it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you think you like something, and then you make yourself rub it out. And so sometimes you lose the image completely. But so there's an element of chance involved and risk. And when it works, it's very satisfying. And then the drawing of the frames was almost like a pleasure, because, you know, I do it 3 or 4 times and it will be fine. So it's like light relief from, you know, draw it and rub it out, and draw it and rub it out, and draw it and rub it out. And so I kind of see this as kind of a contemporary history painting, if you like. Okay, next slide. Again, this is a modernist villa on fire, been filmed by somebody on a digital camera, and I just say dreaming different dreams. So I've always tried to plow my own furrow and dream different dreams. And so you can also see the kind of the lurid close-up of the forest. And what I liked about the forest and the wallpaper drawings, I always work with somebody else. It's kind of like working with a DJ, working with a remixer. I'll give them the image and then they'll remix it. And I kind of like that, because I get very, very bored of working by myself in a studio. And that's another reason why I do performances. It's great to work with somebody else and to see what their input is like. Next image. This is a self-portrait. And it's kind of in part based on a drawing, or sorry, a painting by Watteau of Gilles, his famous clown. And it's also kind of channeling John Wayne Gacy, the famous kind of clown killer from Illinois, who went to the electric chair. And so I kind of like those kind of mashups between things, you know. And so I'm a big fan of Sufjan Stevens, who wrote a song about John Wayne Gacy, you know. And he says something like what Guston said about being the KKK guys, you know, in my heart, I am he, or something like that, you know. And I kind of know what he means, you know. And that's why people are obsessed by, I know, dark shit. You know, people kind of imagine what it must be like to be that person. So anyway, next slide, please. There's a close-up of it. At a more kind of prosaic level, I really like drawing fur. And you know, I really like to, again, everything gets drawn repeatedly and rubbed out, and I have a whole, like, I have about 20 different types of rubber. Again, a lot of people who bang on about their technique and their this, that, and the other, they just project their images and trace it. And I don't have a problem with people projecting their images, but I think they should be honest. And also I think that it gives it a slickness. And that's why I do everything, I square it up. I think if things are traced and enlarged from a projector, you can tell there's something kind of slightly wonky about doing it this way. And I think it actually adds to the drawing. Next image, please. This is my next show. That one was in 2015. This is in 2016. In retrospect, this was too soon. I now realize I need at least 2 years to put together a body of work. And doing something in a year, the way in which I work, I need an awful lot of time to work and to rub out and work and rub out and to look at things. So in retrospect, I wish I waited a little longer. Again, it's something similar. So this is in the Dock in Carrick-on-Shannon. It's a massive room, and it's a floor-to-ceiling drawing done of a forest. It's actually the dark wooded cool, where Lady Gregory and W.B. Yeats kind of, you know, half invented the Gaelic literary revival, and they go in there to look for ghosts and fairies. And again, it's kind of a magical liminal space where things happen. Next slide. This is kind of a close-up of the drawings and the wallpaper. Again, the wallpaper was made with somebody else. I worked with Dave Smith from Atelier Design. Again, it's like working with a remixer. I really enjoy it. I do the initial drawing, I give it to him, he sends it back, I send it back. And so that's a lot of fun. And so in it, there's a close-up of an eye. Now is the era of the eye and looking and being looked at. And also there's a lot of cats. Cats are the second most popular thing on the internet. And I'm fascinated by them. Next slide, we can see them in close-up. Next one, Stephen. So this is a close-up of the forest. Oh, sorry, this is another detail. You get some idea of the size of the space. That isn't an Alice in Wonderland door. That's a full-size actual door there. And next slide. So this is a close-up of one of my cats. I don't know who said, when you look at a cat, are they thinking that they like you, or it would be nice to eat your face for dinner? You know, there's something so unknowable about cats. You know, I certainly would be a cat person, not a dog person, a dog person. And again, I put it against a background. In this particular case, it was pilfered from a painting by Gainsborough. Next slide, please. I really like this one because it's some kind of, you know, this is a Persian cat that's been mutated by us. I mean, it's such a freak. It's been, you know, we've overbred these pedigree cats, and it's some kind of monster, you know, and there's something quite disturbing, I think, about it. I also really like that oval shape, and I've used it repeatedly. I don't know why, I just do. There's something very seductive about that kind of ovoid shape. So next slide, please. Close up of the eye. Again, the drawing of the frames was like a kind of a light relief after spending months on the actual image itself. Next slide. Like I said, I did that last show in a hurry, in a way. So somebody approached me and asked me, would I do a version of that for their house, of the wallpaper? Would I do an install of it in a private house, in a collector's house? So I agreed to do it, and I had to do it all from scratch because I had to resize it all. Anyway, next slide, please. So this is a 40-foot long curved corridor wall in which the wallpaper is the whole way along. Again, of cool wood. Next slide, please. So next one. So again, so it's kind of totally quite an immersive space. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, okay, we missed that one. That's fine, no worries. And this is my most recent show, Dreaming Different Dreams, which closed after a week. And it's on in the Kevin Kavanagh Gallery. And it's about to reopen again on the 8th of June and run for a further 2 weeks. And like the previous shows, I have combined drawing with a Wacom tablet and color with charcoal drawings. In this particular instance, it's a drawing of the the wallpaper drawing is a drawing of the Watzmann mountain in the Bavarian Alps, which was painted by Caspar David Friedrich. It's one of those kind of symbols of the German sublime, but also it's what you can see from Hitler's lair, the eagle's nest in Bavaria. They're in the same range. The next slide, please. For the last few years, I've been, I don't know, I could feel it in my bones, that, I don't know, a sense of unease. I'm not just projecting onto my show what's happened in the last few months, but I've been feeling, I think our society is becoming stranger and stranger and more fragmented since that happened. And I think our nature is unraveling. At the same time, society's become more and more distracted by digital media, mobile phones, and and we're all being farmed by technology. So I think it's a very strange time, and I think the virus just put a tin hat on it. Anyway, on the right hand side, there's a drawing of a boy, and he's kind of a successor to my self-portrait. And on the right-hand side is the black dog. And maybe we'll have a look at the next image, please. And so you can see a close-up again of both of them. And again, next slide, please. So the dog was, it took me 2 years to do it. And so I'd say I spent nearly 1,000 hours drawing this. And so it goes on and it comes off and it goes on. It's very boring in a way, but the charcoal over time accumulates, and it's a drawing that I'm happy with. And I only use willow charcoal, as you know, Stephen. And so there's something about it. There's a depth of blackness that's just gorgeous. And anyway, so I suppose this is the symbol, or it was 2 years ago, of nature, and this is a successor of the cute cats I was drawing. And again, this is just kind of totally unknowable nature, and it just is. And so I suppose some people thought it was scary and some people thought it was cute. I don't know what to say. Next image. Here's a close-up of the dog, so you get some notion of the level of blacks. And I said I draw with loads of. I have a feather duster to kind of brush things down, and then smaller rubbers for details, and then it gets rubbed down and brought back up, and rubbed down and brought back up. And that just happened, until I was finally happy with it. Next slide, please. And so this says FOMO. Apparently, people no longer have FOMO because FOMO is over. And there's nothing to miss out on because we've all been locked up at home. This drawing actually took me, I've been working on it for 4 years, and I had all sorts of, actually, do we have a close-up of this, Stephen? Yeah. I did the sky and the trees, and that took me a couple of years, and I was racking my brains with what to actually draw on it. I had all sorts of dry runs and trials, and FOMO, was the final choice. And this is actually this is the first drawing I started work on in this series, and it was the one that I finished last. So this took me the whole kind of cycle to work on. I presume you all know what fear of missing out, FOMO. I think it's a particularly now, or was a particularly now thing to happen. Next slide, please. On the back is kind of guilty and no. Again, they're similar format. There are words drawn on sky. Apparently, no is my favorite word, according to my other half. She says that's the word I say most often. Also, I suppose in a way it was a reaction to so many people here thinking, you know, yes, there's lots of yes last few years and the power of yes, and I blink on my mobile phone and it'll change the world. And I just think that's nonsense. And the other one says guilty, and that's my eternal state. I can't do anything without feeling guilty. You know, we've ruined the planet, everything, my white privilege, you name it. So I feel guilty all the time. And the final image. So in 2012, Kim Jong-un had his uncle and mentor killed, and he had him assassinated. He actually had him shot with anti-aircraft guns. And amongst his various crimes that he committed, like, you know, gambling and whoring and factionalism, there's always factionalism stretching back to the 18th century. One of his major crimes was he was dreaming different dreams. And I thought how dystopian and terrifying that is, that, you know, they now are in North Korea, they were trying to, you know, control people's dreams. But now if you read about surveillance capitalism, that's what they're trying to do. They're predicting what we want and what we desire. And that's the, you know, that's the world in which we now live. You know, ads suddenly pop up on our screen or on our feed, and they're predicting what we want. And there's even stuff called nudge architecture, which they've come up with to actually persuade you to buy things. And so we have this kind of digital dystopian thing on the one hand, and we have the climate and the black dog on the other, and we're stuck in the middle. And so anyway, so this is what I was thinking about for the last 3 years. And then what happened. So there you go. And so that's my final image. So there you have it.